Chapter 1 Upload. That was my last visit to Dr. Jones' practice, and just to assure myself, I asked, "Can you explain to me again how this will work?" With patience, Dr. Jones, a beautiful 40-years-old woman, for whom I felt lust, answered, "In the previous sections we uploaded your brain patterns corresponding to long-term memories and the deeper encoded information. Today we will upload the rest, the short-term memories and what you recognize as your personality. When you wake up, this will be your last memory." I understand that, but how this will help me to cheat death? This was, in my perspective, the most important question. You see, I was in palliative care and most of the prognosis gave me less than 3 months to live. I felt cheated. Although I lived long enough, 60 years, and in the way, accumulated billions of dollars, this would be no use to me, since no money in the world could stop that disease. Up to that point I was lucky, I rarely felt some pain, and this is why that illness progressed so much before detection, so that when it was discovered, it was already too late. Then someone told me about this experimental procedure, which was offered to the extreme rich as myself, since the costs were also extreme. In brief, they recorded my brain patterns in a very large memory bank, and this would be used in the future to give me a new body, and with it, a new life. It was unclear to me how they would find me this new body. We are in the last stages of research for developing a viable clone body. When we are confidently done with it, we will download your memory patterns in the clone's brain and you will live a new life. Although I was not known for altruism or ethics, the idea of occupying the body of another person, like some body snatcher, made me feel sick. I said, "I have no desire to let anyone die, so that I can live." Dr. Jones smiled and answered, "Don't worry, the clones are grown in a speedway, in days, inside a tank and never wake up while growing, so they have no personality and no memory, they are a blank recording device." But if I will inhabit a clone body, won't this disease accompany me? In growing the clone we will already correct any known small errors in DNA which can produce a disease, and the growing clone, of course, will not be subject to any environmental factor which could have the same effect. Of course, what you will do afterwards, of course, is up to you. Just a last question, will my clone be as old as me when you download the brain patterns? She smiled again and said, "No, don't worry. All tests and calculations we made up to now suggest that we have to stop the accelerated growth at a biological age of 13 to 14 years old, so you will have a long life ahead in your new life." Satisfied with the answers, I asked for my smartphone. First I sent a message to my bank manager to proceed with the last $100 million dollar payment due to the clinic, and next I sent a message to my attorney to proceed with my change of will, since I decided to add considerable part of my wealth to the clinic, to foster research. Of course, I will not remember this, since I will sign the will in the future. If what Dr. Jones told was true, the last memory I will have from my previous life will be this one. After that I was conducted to the chamber I visited so many times before, and, as the door was shut, I closed my eyes, to start the recording process. Chapter 2 Download. Next thing I remember is waking up in a hospital bed. I opened my eyes and when I focused, I saw Dr. Jones, or at least she looks like Dr. Jones, just much older, I guessed in the 70s. I tried to speak, it was hard, but I said, "Dr. Jones?" The woman smiled and answered, "No, sweaty, at least not the one you knew, I am her granddaughter, Rachel." When I pronounced her name, I noticed my voice was different, with a higher pitch and a bit hoarse. I still reminded, what Dr. Jones told that last day, that my clone would have an age corresponding to 13 or 14 years old. So no wonder this was not my voice. I made an extra effort and asked, "How long?" "It is 143 years since your patterns were uploaded." I couldn't believe it did work. When I signed with that clinic, I did it in total desperation, but aware that this was much probably a hoax, I never expected that the clinic could really provide me a new body, as they promised, and now I was really there. The new Dr. Jones said, "Dear child, sleep, you are very tired, we speak more tomorrow." I was really very tired and decided to sleep, but before that I could not stop thinking how strange was her behavior. She called me sweaty and dear child, two things you usually say to a boy, even with 13 years old. I woke up with someone opening the curtains, letting the sun in. It was the new Dr. Jones, and she said, "Time to wake up, Helen." "Why are you calling me Helen? My name is Richard." Then she looked at me, appearing surprised and embarrassed. She said, "Oh, God, I feared that. Are you not Helen N?" "No, my name is Richard D." "I'm so sorry, we tried hard not to make this mistake, but you see, 80 years ago we had a very low period and we almost lost our records when the electricity grid collapsed. We could save the most, but sometimes our records got mixed up." I was shocked. I asked, "This means I am a girl?" "Yes, let me show you," and she handed me a mirror and I saw my face, the one corresponding to a 13 or 14 years old girl. Naturally I got angry. I told it was a contract breach. Dr. Jones, however, even apologizing, told there was nothing to do. Even if my patterns were transferred to my rightful clone, the one occupying this body, that is me, would remain in this body. Two persons with the same pattern would not be acceptable, and they had, after all, ethical concerns about destroying a body with someone inside, and I found the perspective of dying, also, not pleasant. Finally, I realized she was right. There was nothing to do and I would get used with the idea of living my new life as a girl. The old me was already dead for at least 143 years, and perhaps this would not be so bad. Chapter 3: Getting Used. The next weeks were spent in the hospital. I had a physiotherapy routine, since I had to learn how to use my muscles, relearning how to walk, for example. I got acquainted also with my new body too. I was dressed the whole time with a hospital gown, which gave me easy access to my breasts and to my pubic area. According to Dr. Jones, Helen's clone had been grown to early 13 years of age, and hence I was in the beginning of puberty. I interacted also with other persons beyond Dr. Jones and the physiotherapist, whose name was Phyllis, by the way, nurses, and the cleaning crew. Besides Dr. Jones, no one knew I was not Helen, so I started using her name, so things go easier. When I was confident enough, I began walking, first until the nurse's station, but soon I was encouraged to go outside, in the hospital gardens. In order to do so, one of the nurses gave me clothes and I dressed for the first time panties, a training bra, a skirt and a blouse. The nurse also gave me sandals, and I noticed they had some 2-centimeter heels. I found strange wearing those things, but got the consolation in the thought that I had to get used with those things anyway. One thing I noticed from these outside walks was that temperature was higher, concerning the time of the year. I was going to receive my discharge, and Dr. Jones came to talk to me about my future. There is a protocol to deal with our subjects. If you were really Helen, you would start attending the regular school, but since you have no previous knowledge of living as a woman, you will enroll a traditional boarding school for young orphan ladies, where you will be able to adapt. Then the day came in which I said goodbye to the people in the hospital. It was emotional. I had, after all, literally lived my whole life there. Chapter 4: The school. Dr. Jones drove me to the school, the day I received the discharge. I was wearing a simple dress one of the nurses gave me as a departure gift. I was still wearing those sandals I received earlier. Dr. Jones told me that the clinic had a money provision for clients like me and that I would receive a full wardrobe after I arrived in the school. It was the first time I went out of the clinic since I woke up. It was located in what I assumed was a poor suburb of a large city. The houses were in a bad conservation shape, but I noticed all houses had all solar panels in the roof, and I also saw electric generators dispersed everywhere. I had already noticed that the average temperature was higher than I was used to, and also that the amplitude of temperature variation was larger. It rained also a lot, and once I experienced, thanks God, inside the clinic, a very scary tempest. Back in my old life, I knew this day would come. Climate change finally kicked in. In spite of knowing this, I financed back then climate change denial groups, since my main source of wealth was oil trade, and I would not want it to stop. The way there was made via a highway through a forest. I noticed the asphalt in the highway was in a very bad conservation stage, and I found strange also that I didn't see other cars. I asked Dr. Jones, and she told that was a reforested area. I thought that finally the environmentalists won. I felt relieved. I was ashamed about my behavior in my old life. She parked in one of the places in front of an elegant mansion. The mansion had also solar panels in the roof. That was the school. Dr. Jones brought me to the principal's office and said to the lady, "Hi, this is Helen, your new student." The lady opened a smile and said, "Nice to meet you, Helen, be welcome, my name is Mrs. Albert." "Nice to meet you too, Mrs. Albert," I answered as expected. "Our school follows the traditions of the past, I hope you enjoy." Then, she completed. "Come with me, the students are assembled in the cafeteria at this time. It is a wonderful opportunity to present our new student to the whole school." I was afraid. Up to then I had been exposed only to few people, and now I was going to face a whole school, but in my past life I faced many audiences, some much more aggressive than the students of a ladies' school. I said goodbye to Dr. Jones, who needed to return to the hospital, and I followed Mrs. Albert through corridors which looked more like a labyrinth. We reached the cafeteria hearing the typical noise of many teenager students assembled. Arriving there, she spoke with an authority and a powerful voice I would never believe she was capable of. "Students, hear me out." All noise vanished and a room full of teenager girls looked at our direction. Satisfied with the result of her command, she said, "I want to present you your new colleague. She joined our school today. Please welcome Helen in our community." The whole ensemble of teenagers answered in unison, "Welcome, Helen." I am pretty sure I blushed under this demonstration of affection. Then Mrs. Albert, directing to one of the girls in particular, said, "Virginia, did you already finish your coffee break?" "Yes," Mrs. Albert answered the girl whose name is Virginia with a sweet voice. "Then, please, show Helen your room. She will be your new roommate." Then, turning to me, she said, "Go with Virginia and wait in the room. Our staff will find you bringing your luggage and your uniform, but you don't need to worry about lectures now. You will start only after lunch." I thanked her and followed Virginia through the school corridors. In the way she kept talking, asking me details of my history. Since I couldn't tell her the truth, and I doubt she would believe me if I told her the truth, I invented a lie. In brief, I told her I was an orphan and that I had a long treatment at the hospital, in the care of Dr. Jones. When I was discharged, Dr. Jones arranged a place for me at that school. The room was a large suite. It contained 2 beds, one was unused. Virginia told, "This is your bed, but if you prefer, we can exchange places." "No need, thank you." I took possession of that bed by sitting on it. The girl left. She had to attend the lectures until lunchtime. I, on the other hand, remained in the room, first alone, but soon school employees arrived bringing me 2 suitcases I never saw in life and 2 separate sets of uniforms, just like the ones I saw the students in the cafeteria using, a medium-sized red skirt, a t-shirt with the school logo. The employee, I later discovered, was responsible for discipline in the school, told me the school rules, which included the information that I should care myself for my clothes and maintain always one uniform set clean and ready to use, since I should wear it all day during the lectures. I answered, "Yes, madam." I was informed that I was expected 11:45 a.m. at the cafeteria for lunch, and that I should go dressed in the uniform. Until then I was technically free to do anything I wanted, but I was recommended to remain in the room, since students were not allowed to walk the corridors during lectures, except with the teacher's written permission, of course. I used the time to undo my luggage and place the clothes in the part of the closet reserved for my use. I examined the clothes they bought to me. They were skirts, t-shirts, blouses, dresses, panties, bras, socks, items which were typical from a young teenager girl's, at least in my time. I found strange that a thing so volatile as fashion didn't change that much in 143 years. I experimented some of the clothes and they all fit in my body, no surprise. School routine was pretty much the same as when I first did it, in my past life. My class had 10 girls, including me. There were 2 other classes, for girls with 14 and 15 years old. The number of students was about the same for each class, and the school had circa 30 students. Back in my old life I was not rich yet, so I attended public schools. I was used to larger classes. There were the regular lectures in classic disciplines like mathematics, English, natural sciences, history, geography, and I noticed it was all physical geography, no hint of political or economical geography. The strange were not the regular classic disciplines, but those which completed the full-time school timeline. There were disciplines like household economy, infant care, in which we used dolls to learn how to care for babies, domestic utilities, in which we learned things like knitting, embroidering, clothes washing, ironing. Considering that this was a ladies' school, it was perhaps not that strange, but this was already old-fashioned in my own time, more than 200 years ago. The lectures were not the only thing strange in that school. The chit-chat of the students during free time was really weird. Most of the themes ranged from marriage to getting pregnant, taking care of kids. I had never been a teenager girl, much less an orphan teenager girl, so maybe this was normal. I found strange, however, that there was no one interested in pursuing a professional career, that this possibility was not discussed at all. Chapter 5 Suspicion that something was wrong became evident when I surprised Virginia trying, with little success, to apply makeup in our room when she thought I would be away. I was genuinely surprised and asked, "Why are you doing this in hiding?" She blushed and confessed, "I'm ashamed, I want to do this. I see women wearing makeup in the magazines and I want to look like them, but I don't know how to do it right." I, of course, didn't know either, but I knew why. I was a girl barely for 6 months back then and nobody cared to teach me that, not even in the weird female lectures we had in that school. Then I realized no student in that school, even the older classes, there were students wearing makeup. Up to then I thought this was some rule that had not been told yet, but then I started to believe that maybe they didn't do that because they didn't know how to do. Other aspects of the female life were also strange, the way everybody dealt with menstruation, for example, being fast ashamed of finding herself in that time of the month. I felt this the first time I had my menstruation, but again, I knew why I felt this way, again, because I had no experience in being a girl. Then a suspicion formed in my mind, and I broke my most precious rule. I said to Virginia, 6 months ago I was not a girl, at least in my mind. I am Richard D., and I was a billionaire 143 years ago. I paid a huge sum of money to a clinic to upload my brain patterns in a computer system, and when I woke up I was in this body. They said it was a mistake. Virginia looked surprised at me, and said, "This is my history as well." Then she told me an almost exact history as mine, just the name and the amount of years stored in the computer system changed. I knew that name. Back then he was a newcomer to our billionaire club. I never met him before dying in my old life. Virginia had an idea. She went to another room and asked another of our colleagues, Rita, to our room. When she arrived, we both told our histories to her, and she told us hers. Again, she had been a male billionaire back then, and woke up in the body of a young girl. This one I knew back then. Actually, I told him about the clinic. We started to suspect that everyone of the girls' school had been male in the past and had been turned into young females. One mistake could be attributed to an error, but 3 looked more like an intentional plan. We had all been victims of a conspiracy. I said, "We must confront Dr. Jones, she is most likely involved in this." Just like magic, my smartphone buzzed and I found a message from Dr. Jones telling go to the principal's office and talk with no one in the way. "I'm on the way, I bet you want some answers." I went to the principal's office and waited seated in the sofa of the anteroom, since there was no one there after lectures. While I waited alone, I kept imagining what was the reason for this conspiracy. Was something to rob our wealth? Improbable. 143 years after my previous death, The money had been surely distributed, including to the clinic, so they weren't expected to obtain financial gain from my situation. So, what was the reason from all that? Cruelty was not the case. I had been well treated since waking up, including with love. Principal Albert and Dr. Jones arrived together, signaled me to follow them inside the principal's office. Arriving there, Mrs. Albert asked, "Hi Helen, I received information that you are upset about something. Do you want to say something?" Then I told her my history, told about Victoria and Rita, and my suspicion that all girls in that school were previous billionaires who were transferred to your girl bodies. They both heard this with interest, and when I finished, Mrs. Albert turned to Dr. Jones and said, "I told you she was too clever for this school." That surprised me, and I said, "Are you together in this?" Dr. Jones answered, "Yes, sweetie, the clinic and the school network belong to the same organization." Then to Mrs. Albert, she answered, "Yes, I know, my idea to put all the transformed clones together to facilitate integration didn't work." I was amazed with this information. Not only this entire organization was involved in the conspiracy, but we were a scientific experiment. I asked, "Why did you do this to us?" Dr. Jones answered with a long monologue. "In order to understand this, I must tell you something about the history of the world in these 143 years. You, and your colleagues here, belong to the class of the filthy rich, as we used to call you now. You were driven by wealth acquisition and you were very successful in this. You kept concentrating richness in you and leaving a considerable part of the world population in hunger and extreme poverty. If it were only this, there would be no problem, but you wanted more. Economic regulation and taxes took part of the money from you, giving it to the state. Sometimes the state redistributed to the remaining population, sometimes it spent in corruption. Of course, in your perspective there was no difference. Money flowing to the state for any reason was money not coming to you, so your enemy was the state. You started financing liberal politicians first, evolving later to the extreme right, in all cases defending the zero-state policy. There were, naturally, those who saw how damaging this policy was, mostly progressive politicians, but also some enlightened right-wing ones, so you financed also the identitarian agenda, to generate strife, mostly in the left. Then she finished, "Congratulations, you won." The masses of hungry people adhered to the extreme right-wing agenda, and destroyed the state. We have been living hell in the last 120 years. She rested a bit. What gave me opportunity to ask, what we have to do with this? It was Mrs. Albert's turn to answer with a shorter monologue. "We have been maintaining this organization, a school for young female orphans in the clinic, for a long time. Imagine the surprise we had when we discovered the little research project of Rachel's grandmother, the own destroyers of the world with their brain patterns stored to be waken up in the future. We are no barbarian, we couldn't simply erase the patterns, but we couldn't give you the prize you wanted, so we downloaded you in this body." Dr. Jones completed, "Do you know that my own grandmother recorded her brain pattern before dying? I grew her own clone, but stopped the growth in the 3 years old age. Now she is being raised by my daughter as is my granddaughter. She thinks it was an error in her calculations." Then I had the chance to make another question, "So was it all about revenge?" Dr. Jones answered, distraught, "Not at all. How can you think this about us?" I still don't understand. When the state went down, public health system collapsed. This, added to the anti-vax movement you helped to foster, made to help your extreme right friends, lead to old diseases appearing again, and this combined with the consequence of climate change, you kept denying not to interfere with your profits of oil exploration, lead to killing a lot of people. From the 9 billion people we once had, we estimate that only 1 billion is alive today, and the figures keep going down, so we gave you bodies with which you can collaborate with the most urgent need the world has today, to have a lot of kids. You can't use us as a breeding stock. I will report you. Report to whom? There is no state, there is no representative, there is no justice system, police does not exist, at least in the way you knew back then. They are now more like armed bands working to local warlords. In fact, I think we, the schools and the clinic, are the most organized structure in the world. You cannot keep me here. I will find a way to flee. Then Mrs. Albert answered, "Oh, you are free to go any time you want. And Dr. Jones, let us see how long you last out there. The next city is only 5 kilometers away. I guess if you are lucky, you will end up in some brothel, working as a whore. You are pretty, you will make a lot of success." She was upset because I was still acting as if they were my enemies. Mrs. Albert intervened, "Stop frightening the young lady. And to me, you do not need to go. In fact, it is in your best interest to stay here. I don't know how can I do this after everything I learned." "Oh, don't worry, your little insurrection is already neutralized. Both Victoria and Rita were sent to different schools while this meeting takes place, and we chose schools in which they are the only clone, so even if they speak what they discovered, no one will believe." "I will not help you," Dr. Jones very seriously said. "We have one special school about which no one likes to speak. It is a school for unruly girls, those who cannot adapt very well with the gender change. We use their hypnosis and other forms of physical conditioning so that the girls end up behaving like bimbos, even if they resist inside. Then Mrs. Arnold, if you don't collaborate with us, we will have no other option than to send you there." Of course this scared me. They kept saying they wanted my welfare, but this last statement seemed a lot like a threat. "Perhaps to de-escalate the situation," Dr. Jones said, "our experiment here is going down. Despite the subliminal conditioning we are using, the girls keep having trouble in adapting to the female gender. We decided we need an infiltrated agent to teach them how to behave more like a girl, and this can be you." "How?" "I do not know anything about behaving like a girl." "You will have help to learn." "What do you mean?" Dr. Jones said, "We have this special girl living isolated in a house. She is special because she is a trans girl, meaning she was born as a boy, but with a severe case of gender dysphoria. We rescued her from the streets where she was living after her own father expelled her from home, and the clinic performed her gender reassignment surgery." Mrs. Arnold completed, "Her name is Sophia and, understandably considering the hell she was living, she prefers to be alone. She is the more girlish girl I ever met, and she agreed to teach you how to be a woman. When you return you will help us passing this knowledge to the other girls." "How long will I stay with Sophia?" 10 months. We will use a cover story spreading a rumor that you went there because you got pregnant and that you will give your child to adoption after birth. This will also help us to explain why Victoria and Rita were sent away. We will say they helped you sneak out to have sex." And Dr. Jones added, "I suggest you confirm this rumor after you return. This will make you a star in the school." "If I agree with this, what will happen to me?" "You will continue attending the school, as the other girls, until you are 15, then you will attend the debutante ball. There you will meet your future husband." Mrs. Arnold added, "Usually the boys choose the girls, but with the seduction techniques you will learn from Sophia you may be the one choosing." "Who are these boys?" "They are sons of local leaders, who support us in exchange to finding wives for their sons. Our girls are already highly praised since you are well educated, so they are considered excellent mothers. They will enjoy very much if they become more feminine as well." Then Dr. Jones completed, "The Unruly Girls' School also has a debutante ball, but there the girls are auctioned in the end, and I must say the male clients of this school have a tendency of being sadistic." Then she said smiling, "You see, dear Helen, you will end up as a bimbo either willingly or unwillingly." I believe she thought she was making a joke. After all this information, what would you expect I would say? Of course I said I will help them. I returned to my room and Victoria's things were gone. I hope the girl will adapt better in the new school. At least there she will have now someone to teach her how to do a proper makeup. I didn't check, but I am pretty sure Rita is also gone. Tomorrow I will be gone as well. I will meet this girl Sophia and learn things from her. After that I will return, branded as the promiscuous girl who got pregnant and gave away her child. I will keep waiting for a debutante ball, in which I will be forced to take a husband. The worst thing is that what Dr. Jones and Mrs. Albert said about our responsibility in the fall of the civilization was right. I did those things they accused me of doing in my previous life. I guess being punished this way was easy to me. If I had the opportunity to do this to, let us say, Hitler, would I do it differently? Also, learning the truth is awful. Before that suspicion I was living a good life. How can I do this to the other girls? It is better they remain oblivious. I hope this Sophia is someone I can call a friend. If I have to be a better woman, I will need her help.